Is Jimmy Garoppolo going to be traded this season? My short answer is no, I don't believe he will. We just talked about is Trey Lance going to start week 1? And I think there's a much better chance than we originally thought going into this year that that's going to be the case. But even if that's the case, I would not expect the 49ers to trade Jimmy Garoppolo. One, there's not a ton of teams that are in the market. I think there's really 3 teams you can bring up. I think it'd be the Colts, the Texans, and the football team. Seems like the football team's pretty happy with Fitz and what they got there. The Colts are in a weird spot. I think they might be the most likely, and the Texans could potentially move on from Deshaun Watson. I would think that the Texans would be a much more likely option going into the, next year, like in next year's offseason if Jimmy was moved. But I don't think the 49ers want to trade Jimmy Garoppolo right now. We have seen how horrid their backup quarterback play has been. And if he's your backup quarterback, yes, you're paying your backup quarterback a ton of money if that's the case. But if he is the backup quarterback, then I think there's a very good chance that, you don't have that massive fall off if Trey Lance was to go down, if he is that starter. And that's even just assuming that Trey Lance is a starter and not Jimmy Garoppolo. But I would fully expect them to hang on to him at least through this season. But Aiden, do you think that Jimmy Garoppolo is going to get traded, or do you think he's a 49er all throughout this year?
I think he's a 49er for this year, unless a team like the Texans does something completely off the wall and offers their first round pick. I think you say yes to that, obviously. And really, if any team throws you a first round pick, I really think you have to think about it. But like you said, we saw the backup quarterback play last year, and it was not awesome, to say the least. And I think that the Niners have realized having a competent backup is super duper important, just like it is important to have backups at every position on the field. Quarterback isn't one that you normally think, hey, I probably need a competent backup quarterback. I don't think Rosen or Nate Sudfeld is that guy that we're going to roll out and feel pretty good about us winning. Jimmy's a guy who can do that. Jed York has already said, yeah, I'm fine paying the contract. And he's well liked by the players. If it was a issue where he wasn't getting along with somebody, maybe you ship him out to help locker room morale, but everybody loves having him around. He's friends with Trey. They have an interesting relationship, and I think both of them have handled this not easy situation really, really well. It's a little bit different than the passive-aggressive Joe Montana, Steve Young relationship from years past. But I would be very surprised if Jimmy is not on the roster throughout this year, because I don't expect anyone to really overpay, and there's no reason to get rid of a guy when he's really causing no issues.
So I feel pretty much the same way. I don't think that he's going to get moved. I think that there's a lot of people out there, especially listening right now, that probably expect him to be moved. And if you do, comment, let us know what you think, because I would love to hear where you guys are at on that, what kind of value you would get back from, what teams are options. I do think those are the 3 teams that are pretty clear, and I don't know if there's many other teams in play. I think that if they were to move him, and I texted you this earlier, Aiden, they probably would have signed Andy Dalton in the offseason and then moved him pretty much at the same exact moment, but they didn't. So I don't think he will. But if he was, what would you expect to be the return for him? And then do you think those 3 teams that I brought up are the most likely destinations?
I think if he's going to get traded, I don't think the Niners do it for less than a second. I think they traded a second to get him. They'd want a second back. And I think those 3 teams are, I'd probably say the Texans are 1, Colts are 2, football team 3. But the Texans want to be bad. I think that this is the first time that they've had their own pick in 2-3 years. And I think that they're excited to finally make that pick after the Laramie Tunsil trade and making some poor personnel decisions and a new regime. They are former Patriot staffers, So that's something to at least keep in mind. I think Caserio is a guy who's the Texans GM, had a major hand in drafting Jimmy. So it's definitely possible, but I don't. There's unless a quarterback goes down, similar to the Colts. I would be very surprised if he's moved because no team's going to panic. Like the Colts have plenty of other options. I think that they'd feel okay trotting out Eason or I don't even know if Brissett is still on their team.
It'd be Ellinger.
God, okay, maybe they're a little bit higher than I'm thinking, but I would say he's not going to go for less than a second, and nobody's going to offer a second. I would be surprised, pleasantly surprised. But
That's why I think he won't be moved either, because you look at it and you go, okay, what's the value to the 49ers to have this quarterback? They have a championship caliber roster. That is very clear to me. Does that necessarily mean they're going to even be a playoff team? No, we learned last year that does not guarantee that. You can have any amount of injuries that can derail that. But heading into this year, they are one of the top rosters in the league especially when you don't count the quarterback position, just because there are some question marks. Finally, some good question marks at it, but there are some question marks for the quarterback position. But you look at the roster is ready to go. And if you were to get into a situation where you had to go out with a backup quarterback, this year would be the first year under Kyle Shanahan where that wouldn't be, a disaster mode, where you could still win with your backup quarterback because they've won. Well, one of the guys they went to the Super Bowl with, the other guy was the 3rd overall pick. So you would hope that they're pretty confident in both of those guys, with the team with both those guys. So I think you're pretty spot on when you're talking about what's it worth the 49ers to keep him. If they move him for a 3rd and then they get into a situation where, oh no, we don't have a backup quarterback. Well, then the season's over, and then it wasn't worth trading away him for a 3rd. Now, a 2nd, you can land a marquee player. Okay, of course you can land a marquee player with a 3rd-round pick, but it is much more likely that you hit on that 2nd-round pick. So that's why I think that that's probably the bare minimum that they would want back for him. And I don't think a team's going to offer that, especially now. Most of those deals are in the offseason or maybe trade deadline time. So that would probably mean that Jimmy's been starting, or at least has started some games early on. But I think you're right. I think that the price is a 2nd-round pick, and I would not expect another team to go out and send that. But I think that kind of does it with this Jimmy Garoppolo talk. I think it's a weird spot for him, especially because he could easily start. We could be wrong on this, and he could start. He could play the whole year, or he could start for a little bit and get traded. But if he doesn't start, it's a really weird spot for him in the 49ers because he's making, 25 to 28 million this year, somewhere in that range. And he's going to take a big cap hit, getting paid a lot. And if he doesn't see the field making that much money, it's going to be really interesting because you just don't see that much in football. So it's going to be really interesting to see how this plays out. But anything else you wanted to add on the Jimmy Garoppolo front, Aiden?
Yeah, I think the most likely time for him to get traded would be after week 2. The Niners have the largest spread in the league in week 1. We play the Lions. I think most people expect the 49ers to beat the Lions and look good doing it. So if Jimmy comes out and destroys the Lions, plays an awesome game, goes out, beats the Eagles, and looks good doing it, and say the football team loses their first 2 games and Fitzpatrick doesn't look that good, they might look to their roster and say, hey, we have the components of a team that could make the playoffs and do some damage. We're just missing the quarterback. I could see a team like that being like, fine, we'll pay the 2nd-round pick. We'll pay the 1st-round pick. And I think that that's the most likely time for it to happen. But it does take a lot of things to go right. Jimmy needs to be the starter. He needs to play well. A team needs to not do well. So I don't think that that's likely to happen at all. But I think that that's possible and something to at least keep in mind.